Welcome to the Intimate Marriage Podcast. I'm your host, Alexandra Stockwell. I'm a physician and an intimate marriage expert, and I specialize in showing educated, successful couples how to channel the ambition, intuition, and focus that creates great professional results into building joy-filled, passionate relationships. My husband and I have been married for 25 years. We have 4 children and full professional lives, and we have an amazing relationship. I've shown hundreds of couples how to create their own version of emotional, sensual, and erotic intimacy. And in this podcast, I'll show you how to also. Let's dive in. And today, I'm really excited to welcome Dr. Carly and Ryan Crewe. Hello.
Hi there. Thanks for having us.
I'm really excited because Carly, you and I connected online. I don't even remember exactly where, but I just felt like if we were in the same room in that moment, there just would have been like fireworks. Like you had the same point of view that I did, and it just was like so synergistic. And I thought, okay, I want to have this conversation on the podcast so others can benefit, and of course with Ryan as well. Before we go further, I should just say that I just listened to an episode of your podcast on productivity, and it helped me understand why there's so much to say about who you are and what you do. And I'd actually like to have you do it. Will you introduce yourself and all of the different professional places that you put your attention as well as the personal ones?
Absolutely. I'd love to. So my area of expertise and passion is women's mental health. And so I'm trained as a family physician, and we're from Canada. And we spent the last about 10 years of our life in Alberta, but have recently just become kind of modern day nomads. And so we were moving all over Canada, and now we're actually in Mexico. But professionally, I run a virtual women's mental health clinic that I started in early 2021, and that has grown into an incredible team of now almost close to 12 physicians. We'll be 12 as of next month, starting just with myself back in January 2021. And I, like you mentioned, host a podcast called Mind Over Motherhood. I'm an author. I have a published book out called You Are Not Your Anxiety, which is kind of like my no bullshit approach to managing anxiety for women and helping them kick people pleasing and anxiety to the curb. And then I also am the host of an online mental health membership program for women. So lots of different offerings for supporting women with their mental health, because I'm super passionate about that. And then personally, obviously, I'm married to Ryan. We've been married now for 10 years, together for 15. And we have 2 beautiful twin girls who are going to be 5 this month, and we can't believe it. And we travel with our 2 senior dogs. And normally we call home a 32-foot motorhome that we used to travel across Canada this summer. So that's kind of us in a nutshell. And Ryan supports our family and my business in a myriad of ways. He's been a stay-at-home parent since our girls were born. He selflessly gave up his own career in engineering to do so, and now supports me in my businesses as well. So yeah, that's a little bit about us.
Just a little bit. Oh my goodness, I have so many questions. But before I ask, let's start right there with you, Ryan.
Sure.
Tell us about the career that you gave up, because it wasn't just that you were flipping burgers, right? You had a career as an engineer. Tell us about giving that up and becoming a stay-at-home dad.
Yeah. So I was a power engineer by trade, I guess you'd call it. And I kind of got to the part of my career where I had to decide, is it going to be family or is it going to be work? And I was seeing myself working long hours and lots of shift work. So we decided to start to have, try to have kids. And we made the decision to go ahead and have me stay at home with the girls, because it just made the most sense. And it was really difficult to work those, those shift work hours.
Especially with a young family. Like we when we found out I was pregnant with twins, which funny story, Ryan predicted at least like 5 years earlier, I think. We kind of thought about what would be the easiest for our family, knowing that we were going to have 2 little babies, and that my career was definitely more flexible than Ryan's was, very much like a rotational shift work, 12-hour shifts overnight, that sort of thing. And with my job at the time as a rural family doc, I was doing emergency call and I was doing deliveries myself and stuff. So we looked at both careers and decided that Ryan's was probably the one that was going to limit us the most in the time we wanted to spend with our family. And so he's, like I said, been off since basically a month before the girls were born. And it was invaluable to me, especially in my postpartum period, because I had a significant postpartum mood disorder. So Ryan was able to be off right from when the girls were born and then all the way up until now. So
yeah, we didn't completely decide if I was going to leave my job. I worked at a gas plant. It would have been northwest of Calgary, about an hour. And we didn't completely decide until I was, done my paternity leave. Mm-hmm. And then we just had to make the choice, was I going to, and there were so many different factors. Like we were looking at homeschooling the girls at the time and different things. And it was pretty obvious that we were going to make the decision and I could just go back to work later on if I wanted to.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. And Ryan, what's the best thing about being a stay-at-home dad, and what's the most surprising thing?
The best thing about being a stay-at-home dad is for sure, like being able to see my girls like every single day and just seeing their little personalities come out and seeing them grow. The most surprising thing would be probably the stereotype around how men think that, it's just like the best thing, like you're just going to be a stay-at-home dad. Like they think that it's just like no work at all to be a stay-at-home dad. Yeah.
He got razzed a ton when they were talking about whether he would be staying home. Like when he was in the gas plant with all the guys. And he'd be razzed all the time, like, oh, you're just going to be home, like, playing video games, which Ryan never plays video games. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But you're just going to be home, like, chilling, playing video games, not realizing, like, no, he's raising basically 2
I don't think
firecrackers.
That's not an assumption that women are making. That's an assumption that men are making, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that as the steady, loving family backdrop, Carly, I didn't realize you started early in 2021 as one doctor, and now you have 12 doctors working for you. Mm-hmm. I feel breathless with all the other things that you've described doing, but just going from clinical practice to becoming a CEO of a company is a massive thing in such a short time. We're recording this in November of 2021, so that's less than 11 months ago.
Yeah. And it's almost as overwhelming to you as it is to me. I'll be honest. I kind of use this analogy sometimes. I've been in the world of kind of online business and my podcasts, and I did some coaching at one time and, since about 2019. And for a lot of that time, it really felt like there was something I was trying to create, but it felt like I was pushing a train to try to get it going. Like I just did not feel like it was quite the right fit. And then last fall, like I had a bolt of lightning into my head. I had this idea, why don't I start? Because I was doing so much mental health work at the time. And I thought, well, why don't I do it virtually? Because Ryan and I had been passionately trying to figure out how we were going to travel more, as that's always been a value for us and our family. Even before we had kids, we thought, how are we going to travel more? And it fell upon me. Thank you, pandemic, as well. It kind of fell upon me to say, like, why don't I just create a virtual mental health clinic? And so when I began Eunoia, which is the name of my clinic, it was very much just going to be something that I could see my patients from Mexico, for example. And then I opened the doors on January 4th, and 4 days later had like 65 women on my waiting list, and was like losing my marbles, actually. And I have to give Ryan the credit. It was actually his idea. He's like, hey, why don't you consider maybe if any other doctors want to do this with you? And at first I was like, there's no way, like nobody's going to want to do that. Why would they just do it themselves? And sure enough. So then we took on our first 3 doctors in March.
And one of them happened to be one of your medical
so
school
that's who I reached out
classmates.
to first, was one of my best friends from medical school, who I felt wouldn't judge me if it went badly. And she joined. And then, it's just been, I've basically added 1 to 2 doctors almost every single month since March. So you're right. It's been like, now the train is going and I'm not even sure I'm on it sometimes. Like, I'm not pushing it anymore. It's very much chugging along on its own. And it's been a whirlwind because on top of that, like I said, I run my membership and then I have courses and stuff. So it's been like a business in like 0 to 60 seconds. Like, it's been quite fast.
Okay. So of course the business elements are fantastic, but I'm here wondering, you're in your RV. Are you in your RV in Mexico right now?
No. So we're actually in a rental house, but we were just in the RV for all of the month of August when we traveled from coast to coast in Canada.
We're storing our RV for the winter in Halifax.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're in Mexico in a rental house and your almost 5-year-old twins are there and Ryan's a stay-at-home dad and business is taking off. Do you have an office there or do you work in the rental home, Carly?
Yeah, we actually do, thankfully. It doesn't have a door. That's the only issue right now with the office that we have, is it doesn't have a door, which is a problem for our kids, for sure.
The walk-in closet has a door.
The walk-in closet has a door, but
the office
does not. So we do have an office, and actually, to make it kind of work, because Ryan has some, he is our kind of chief financial officer for the business now. And so he does like bookkeeping and all the financial things. And so we have sort of set up some office hours for both of us to make it work, because we have learned now over the last like 3 or 4 months at the very least that he definitely needs some really defined time to do his work, and I need to find time with my work, and we both need defined time without children as responsibilities for us. So,
and if you're in Mexico there, though, do you hire local help for the children, or it's the two of you providing all of your children's?
It's the two of us. So when he's working, like, for example, he had 4 hours this morning. So I had the kids at the pool and doing crafts. And then realistically, the majority of the time it's me working and him with the kids, entertaining them. They spend a lot of time at the pool right now, which is what they love. And, but no, for right now, it's just the two of us. And that's the one thing about traveling that we've noticed, is that unlike families that are in one place with family around them, we don't have often people around us that we know and trust with our kids to be with them. So it definitely is kind of full on between the both of us. And we just try to do it really strategically to make sure we're offloading each other when we need it to happen.
Okay. So with all of this priority and the life choices you've made to really both be nurturing your family and nurturing the business, where do you find time to turn towards one another? How does that work?
Usually it's after bedtime, as long as we're not recording a podcast episode. No, no, it's usually after bedtime.
Like right now.
Usually it's after, like, our kids go to bed at 7:30. Occasionally I will have after hours meetings because of the time difference. But most of the time it's evenings, I would say. We spend a lot of time in the evenings together. Yeah. Whether it's like watching a movie, or sometimes, we try to have a strategic life meeting every Sunday evening after the kids go to bed to kind of plan what some of our priorities are going to be that week.
Will you tell us what such a meeting is like? How does it begin? Is there an agenda?
It's somewhat new to us, admittedly, but we found we felt like life was going by so, at least I did. I'll speak for myself and then you can speak for yourself. Sure. I kind of felt like life was just going by so fast. And before we were here, our life is busy. So before we were here, I was locuming in a small hospital in Nova Scotia in Cape Breton, actually.
Describe what that is? I obviously know, but there are many listeners who wouldn't.
So I was providing temporary physician services in a really small rural hospital in the very tip of the east coast of Canada. So I was doing emergency department work, with the shifts were actually 48 hours of call, as well as doing clinic work. And so those weeks, without us being mindful, they would be like gone before we turned around, and we would have maybe, not have eaten as healthfully as we wanted to, or we hadn't planned as well for both of us to get like exercise time, because for both of us, it's really important that we move our bodies. So I think the idea came of us wanting to sit down and really look at, what do I have on my agenda this week? What does Ryan need to do? What do we want for the kids this week? Like, what do we want for their learning this week? And then what do we want for each other? like our fitness and all those sorts of things. So that's how it came about for me. I don't think we have a formal agenda though.
No, we never really came up with a formal agenda, but I think it was kind of just, based on what we needed for the next week and catching up on like the important things together, like budgeting and.
Yeah, just looking at each other's priorities, because it was easy for me because I'm so busy with my work to kind of get lost in it without Ryan being like, hey, like we have some other things we have to focus on too in the household, like figuring out where we're going to store our RV for the winter. And he would manage most of those things, but of course wants my input. So it was just trying to define a time for us to really focus on like what needs to be done this week and what some of our plans were.
It's so interesting to hear how it just evolved. Sunday evening meetings with our calendars in hand was one of the most significant things in my marriage. And I think one of the ways that my husband and I really developed amazing communication skills, because in that context, you need to learn to honor and speak up for your own needs as well as honor the other person's. It's a kind of a benign context to learn how to really create the both and way of approaching life. Have you found that as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a newer thing with us, I will be honest, but we put it on the calendar and we definitely make it a priority because there's so many things that we both want to do. Like even when it comes to our girls are only going to be 5. So in terms of their, education, we want it to be both of us involved. Even if Ryan's the more present one with them, we wanted to kind of have a bit of a plan and, be able to do it intentionally. And I didn't want that to all fall on him. So that kind of came about as well, is like, what do we want to focus on with the girls this week? Like, how are we going to get them outside?
Well, a bit of a plan, but less of a plan at the same time, because we don't want to really formally educate them.
Yeah.
We call it fun schooling.
We've taken unschooling and made it more fun because we just, kind of some non-traditional education and really to school our children around the world is kind of our mission. So, yeah.
So where will you go next?
So we'll be here for 6 months and then we'll be back in Canada.
Well, we might not be at this place for 6 months, but
we'll be probably in Mexico for 6 months, and then we'll be back in Canada for 6 months, and that is still kind of to be determined exactly where we'll be. We'll land on the East Coast and then probably make our way back again to the West Coast at some point next summer. And then after that, we're not really sure. We so far really enjoyed Mexico, and I think we're all a little bit. Ryan and I again speak for him a lot, which I shouldn't, but I myself just want my girls to be a little bit more aware of things before we go to like any countries beyond Mexico where there just might be more crime, just safety wise. But
yeah, because I feel too that they're so trusting of other people and they just don't have that level of awareness quite yet.
Yeah. So we liked Mexico because it's also similar time zones and it's, a quick short flight back to Canada if we needed to, but I'm not sure where we'll go. We envision like Costa Rica. We've talked a lot about Bali. I think we both love to go to Thailand.
But we figured out pretty quickly when we started doing a lot of research for Mexico that it just takes a lot of time to do the research.
Yeah, to find a place and
to find a good place. Like this place, we have a car and the place in a good area.
Yeah.
It's a nice, secure, gated facility. So
yeah.
That's so interesting to hear the ways in which you provide for your family in terms of finding a safe international destination. I really appreciate hearing that, Ryan. One of the questions that I ask all of my listeners is based on the reality that relationships are the vehicle for personal growth. So I'd love to ask you, Carly, what have you learned about yourself as a result of being married to Ryan?
So many things. So my parents divorced when I was 2 years old. And I think what I've learned through my marriage with Ryan and my relationship is how to navigate conflict in a constructive way, because I don't think that was ever modeled to me. My mom was a single parent and did have some partners, but they were never really live-in partners where I was able to see, constructive conflict and respectful conflict. And so I remember really early on, like my coping skills were all of like, we got angry with each other and I would just be like, hey, I'm out. I don't know how to deal with this. Like, and there's lots of times that I was like, okay, I can't do this. I'm done. Like in our early relationship. And I think to contrast that, Ryan's parents have been married where they're going to have their 35th wedding anniversary this year, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they just did, or they're going to.
Their 40th.
Their 40th, pardon me. And so in contrast, I feel like he had a bit more of like the stick with itness in relationships than I had ever seen. And so that was a big one for me. I think I've really learned more so how to, I mean, of course now, like I'm not, taking my rings off every time I turn around by any means, but I think in the early beginning parts of our marriage or our relationship, it was really hard for me. And I had to learn those skills of conflict resolution in a healthy, constructive way. And I think that he shows me a lot of the places that I don't see. I think that he's really, I've always told Ryan that I appreciated that he can be open and honest on the things that he sees in me that he thinks I could improve on. And he's good at that. And I respect that when he does, even if I don't sound like it when he tells me it the first time. But yeah, I think that those are probably some of the things that I've seen for myself growing in our marriage for sure.
Okay, those are such profound things. And before I ask Ryan the same question, do you have something, Carly, that you could share about how you do stick with it to create constructive times when there's conflict? Is there a particular moment where you pivoted and you're like, oh, I get it, or some general tip you'd share?
I mean, I can remember the time, and it was like we had just basically been engaged. I can still remember it because it rings true. We were arguing in the car. You might remember this too. And we were arguing, and I remember actually taking my engagement ring off and like very dramatically. Now, granted, we've been married so forgive me. We've been married for 10 years. Okay. So this was a younger, more dramatic version of me. And I remember taking my engagement ring off and throwing it at him. And he actually, I think he actually caught it and said to me, you can't tap out every single time we fight. And I still remember that to this day. I think that was kind of a turning point for me in an argument. Now I feel like that doesn't come up. Like I'm not tapping out ever. Basically now we've very much made it clear that, there's a couple things that are like deal breakers and it has to be pretty significant to be a deal breaker. And so I think now there's just our fighting is really, and it always has been, truthfully, it's respectful as much as we can keep it respectful. I think I personally really try to stay focused on the issue rather than the person. Like we both know that we're not at our best when we start attacking each other's person instead of the issue or the concern. Right. But I think, for myself, I would say that those are some of the strategies that I lean on. And that's kind of the turning point I remember as something that like, whoa, this is something that I'm going to need to work on, figuring out how to stick with an argument rather than just tap out,
Yeah, that is well said. Ryan, what have you learned about yourself as a result of being married to Carly?
I feel like I've learned a lot of things that I need to improve on.
You are such a gracious human being. Wow, that was amazing how you said that. Keep going.
Yeah. I just feel very like humbled, and I just feel like she has taught me a lot of things about myself, and kind of drawing a blank here.
That's okay.
I'm gonna be honest.
Well, what I hear in your response is a willingness to take what she gives you and consider it. And I think that's amazing.
He does. And I try, it almost makes me sound like I'm after him all the time, but I think that we both, if I can speak for you, I think that we're both really passionate about, when it comes to parenting our kids, for example, we've both really taken, an approach, or we want to take the approach of like, all emotions being welcome and emotional acceptance and helping our kids really regulate. And that for me is like my jam, like mental health and emotional regulation and all that. That's stuff that I learn about, I teach about, I talk about, I love so much. And so, but I'm grateful all the time that we both have that same kind of desire and approach. And so he's always been so open to learning different ways. You know, both of us have been learning, because nobody's an expert at parenting. But we've both been learning how to handle situations in a different way than we probably would have been trained to do, like when we were raised, or how, you know, we feel like we want to in that moment when you want to rip your child's head off because they're making you so frustrated. I think we're both quite good at like reflecting that back to each other, I think, as well. Yeah.
Well, that creates so much context for all the various offerings that you have. If someone wants to become a mental health patient, or take your course, or read your book, or listen to your podcast, where should they go? I mean, all of that will be in the show notes, but go ahead, please.
Yeah. It's all pretty simple. My website's carlycrewe.com. It's Crewe with an E on the end, like the crew of a ship. My podcast is Mind Over Motherhood, but it's not just for mothers. It's definitely a women's mental health podcast. And I have guests as well, and solo episodes, and I really enjoy it. It's an excellent free resource. And then, so my book you can access on my website, as well as my membership. The Eunoia Medical Clinic, due to licensing for our physicians, is limited to Canadian patients. But if you are a listener in Alberta, it is free to you through your Alberta Health. And if not, it's private pay across Canada. And that's eunoiamedical.ca, EUNOIA. And Eunoia means a well mind. So that would be the best. I'm most active on Instagram. We're both actually active on Instagram. We have a little travel page as well that Ryan maintains, and we kind of follow our little family travels. It's called Full Time Cruise. And we post some stuff about our kids there and where we're going. So you could find us there. And I'm on Instagram at Carly Crewe.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm so grateful for this window into the incredible world the two of you have created with one another, with your family, professionally, and in terms of internationally as well. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Intimate Marriage Podcast. For more information about Alexandra, her book, and her coaching services, go to theintimatemarriagepodcast.com.